All right, good morning, guys. So we're here right now with the law office Yuriy Moshes, and thank you for doing our first session, guys. And I'm just going to do a quick introduction to our legal team over here at law office Yuriy Moshes. So first and foremost, we got Yuriy Moshes. Yuriy, you there?
So there you go. I'm here. Thank you for having us, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. And Gennady Litvin. Good morning, Gennady. And
how you doing, everybody?
Is Igor on the line still? I don't know if Igor's still here. Good morning, Igor. Good morning. Thank you for joining. This is a very meaningful session to all of us because we're going to be talking about past, present, and future legal topics surrounding the real estate industry and also surrounding the business side of it as well. They're going to be discussing because Yuriy and his office actually opened their office that got started around 2010. So we also want to touch on the entrepreneurship side of this as well. So Gennady, just if we can go to that part of it, the business aspect. You guys started in 2010. Transactions, real estate attorneys, from my experience, really are dependent on transactions in order to kind of to grow their business. So we could talk a little bit about what that looked like in 2010, because transactions weren't as robust as the past 3 years. So how did you guys navigate those tough waters? Well, first give a brief introduction of your law firm, and then of course talk about those waters, navigating those waters.
Thanks, Mike. I'm sorry, just had to yell at somebody next door.
I got it.
We're all in this boat together, guys.
For sure.
Just to give you a little bit, and like I said, it's great to see everybody's face and some pictures and just somebody's name. Nonetheless, what we saw coming out of 2010, we were ourselves in a very dire situation. Market was unstable, crashing, and we had the opportunity to either crawl back into our shell or we had the opportunity to take advantage of it. What we decided to do is a prime example of kind of what some of the writers and some of the top economists talk about is, you should be ready for the downfall. That's when you get bigger and better. As an example, kind of how we started out during the entire downfall and how we progressed into growing our business at that time is changes needed to be made, and most importantly, the changes in mindset needed to be made. What we started to do is maintain a very high level of communication and education with all of our leads and all of our potential clients. We started to spend more money on reaching out to our leads, and we started to spend more time and effort on doing so. And what that helped us to do is that it helped us build a pipeline, a funnel, so to speak, that started to overflow very quickly starting towards the first quarter of 2011. So while it may have taken, let's say, 1 or 2 quarters for us to build these relationships with clients, with referral partners, with other opportunities where we may have found, an ability to merge with somebody or some sort of acquisition to come out bigger and better, the fruits of that labor started to come into fruition, I would say, in the next quarter or 2. So the purpose of me saying this is you have to envision that this is right now the opportunity to set yourself apart from the 95% of your colleagues that are not going to take that step forward, that are not going to put one foot in front of the other and figure out a way to pivot the current relationships that you have, to pivot the current transactions that you have. For instance, what we were doing at that time, every single phone call, and we had it in our scripts at that time, we would end every single phone call with a question as to, do you think there is anybody else that we can help with either providing them information as to what's going on, or we can jump on a call with them to kind of explain the same thing that we are discussing with you right now. And that is actually, I believe it's a form of marketing. I see, Mike, you have a beautiful grin and smile on your face. You're going to jump in and tell me what the marketing term of that is.
Well, no. What the smile on my face is very, very, very relevant, and it's an entrepreneurial spirit. I think that hopefully this is a self-discovery for many agents listening in, is that you guys as attorneys had, number one, a script, right? So many agents were like, oh my gosh, a script. I know Paulie mentioned the other day when she was on my team, some of the stuff at first just seemed like, why am I doing this? Why is Mike sharing this with me? And it's funny that your law firm, very successful one at that, started off with scripts and then ended off, you had some structure, and to ask for more business. So unbelievable. That's really what I had to just say. Unbelievable how the correlation is and how it was very relevant. 2010, you had to set yourself apart, as you said, to the 95% of the people that were all sounding the same. And because there's always only a limited number of transactions, and you got to get the piece of your pie. And there was enough. It's just a matter of you had to kind of take, get out in front more. So excellent to hear that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. And basically the way it worked is, using our scripts, we had the rebuttals at the end. And essentially we had every single person that was on the call, when they were ending the call, the goal was to get 3 to 5 contact numbers to speak with an introduction after that, because we as attorneys, we can't reach out to them. They have to reach out to us. So what we would do is we would actually hold these people to it. And we would set concrete times, me personally. Hey, Mr. Smith, look, I know you told me that John is having a similar situation. He's an uncle or aunt. Do you think I can call you tomorrow and set it? 12 o'clock. It'll be the same structure where you can conference call John. You can make an introduction, and then you can get off the phone so I can have a conversation with them. That's how we did it. Doesn't mean that you need to do it. We needed to do it that way because we needed that smooth transition, so we are not actually soliciting per our ethical obligations as attorneys. For you, it's actually a little bit easier. You can dial that number directly and use or name drop that. But that's just one example of how we did things differently. Another thing that we did differently then and that we are now doing as well is we are increasing our marketing and advertising opportunities as opposed to decreasing them. Now, that doesn't mean that we are spending more money, even though I did mention previously that during the 2010, I would say about June, we started to navigate and put more money into print marketing because we felt that during the summer seasons, we would have higher conversion of mail, but that's on Mike and his statistics to tell you. My point of mentioning this is we did not stop or slow down. We actually sped up. What that happened, and organically actually what occurred, is that we sped past a lot of our competition that was still chasing their old deals. And what that means is they were chasing the old transactions that they had in the pipeline that it was taking them a month to close as opposed to, let's say, a week. And now they're chasing the same old dollars and cents that that they already monetized in the previous month. Whereas us, we were already monetizing business from the past and starting to convert relationships and business that started to come into fruition within the next quarter or two. We also started to pivot. And that's when we heavily got into the foreclosure market. That's when
Gennady, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure that we all got that, because that was another mind-blowing statement over here. Because we got real estate entrepreneurs, agents, and I want to make sure they heard that loud and clear. How you sped up, how you still focus on those 4 pillars: lead generation. Right, many people are trapped in the client care situation, and that's very important. You have to serve your clients, but you must not forget that you need to continue generating new business, and that, to me personally, is extremely helpful on this call. Before I let you go on, I just want to remind anybody who jumped in over here, because there was a bunch of people that just jumped in. that we will get to COVID-19 disclosure updates towards the end of this call. There's be plenty of times for Q&A. So just please be patient for those that you guys want to hear what they want to say about that. So just please be patient on that. So go ahead, Gennady. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure we keep the pace and going on.
No problem. What I was just going into is the pivot opportunity. Do not travel with horse blinders on. Right now is not for us to do that. So usually I would say that, we operate in our lane, and we operate as if a horse does in a race. The reason why a horse has blinders so that they don't go into any other lane. In situations like this, when markets begin to unravel, it's very important for us to have an open mindset and be able to think outside the box. So what we started to do was as opposed to trying to put deals together, we were navigating the deals that were falling apart. For you, for instance, an idea may be in a situation like this is not navigating deals that are falling apart, but pulling information and further resources out of the deals that are stuck. So let's say you have a transaction right now, and we had plenty of these back then and right now. Transactions are stuck. The wheels are not moving, either because of financing or either because of legal. Let's say county clerks are not able to provide us with complete title searches. Back 2010, it was the lending and credit lines were frozen. The goal for us in those types of transactions were to reach out and again ask for any other ability and opportunity to help them. So what we started to do is, hey, do you have any other legal needs that we can help with? For you, the opportunity is, hey, do you have anybody that in the family right now that are in trouble in terms of they need to get out of a rental, or they need to get into a rental, or they need to get into an opportunity to sell or buy? Now, one of the biggest opportunities that we kind of jumped on at that time is we opened up geography for our business a little bit. For you, what that means is potentially setting up bigger and better referral relationships nationally and across county lines. You may not be able to obtain immediate satisfaction as far as income right now, but if you start, obtaining leads and referring them out, that'll also begin to establish relationships, not only to monetize the situation that we're in right now, but hopefully in the future where you're going to start getting some business back. I know the Moochies are big on that, and they're probably one of the best teams that I know in that type of referral relationship business. We found for us personally, that was huge. That's kind of what blew us out, is that we were able to open our spectrum and start referring business back and forth amongst colleagues. That gave us the water and the ability to survive during a time when other people didn't even open their minds to the ability of or thinking of, hey, instead of me hanging up this call and saying go online and look for somebody, I did is, hey, let me go online myself. Let me go find somebody, and then I'm going to patch that relationship through and make sure that I have some sort of piece of that pie to eat. So we found that to be a huge, huge, huge element of our ability to flourish during that time. I just wanted to make sure that I did mention that element.
Yeah, and Gennady, just to stick on that point for a second, we are in the transaction business. Most like real estate attorneys are in the transaction business. So when you have, 5.3 million transactions in the United States in real estate, that's a finite number. And if you look at the averages were pretty consistent even during the downturn. It went down quite a bit. So to your point, something we bring up in the office all the time, but I think that some agents or some entrepreneurs didn't necessarily kind of have an open mind to it. And that's what leads me to this. If I'm for example, the neighborhood expert just in this one neighborhood, well, if there's not enough transactions in that neighborhood, you can keep fighting for all that's there. And there's only so much you're going to get out of that. So it's not about what you necessarily did wrong. You might have been doing everything right, spending the money to market, making the phone calls to that neighborhood. This is a transaction business. So if you don't broaden your horizons, and not only through the networks, like using a Remax referral network, but also just neighborhood, because we have a lot of micro markets in Brooklyn and Staten Island. So, a lot of times agents during the transition, they get stuck in that. I'm the Bay Ridge expert, I'm the Great Kills expert, I'm the Toad Hill, I'm the Sunset Park, Sheepshead Bay, whatever the expert is, but you have to look at it by zip code. How many transactions are being produced there, and how much can an agent get out of that? And it sounds like that's what helped you during the downturn, and then it just exploded your business because you diversified. Is that correct?
That's exactly correct. I think the numbers were showing for us by 2011, I would say over 50% of our business was referral business because the market was still extremely down. For us, that gave us an opportunity to feed the business by having that source of income, because we started to establish all those relationships and they started to monetize and be fruitful. And for us, it wasn't monetization and being fruitful just in one area. I mean, we literally started to just pass business around and have mailbox money come in to allow us to build that business that needed to happen by 2012, which is when, kind of led us into this emerging market.
Yeah. And just to help out some of our entrepreneurs here, when we say building the network, I think the challenge is many entrepreneurs get overwhelmed, right? They think they'll think, well, I've got to go to Florida, I've got to go to California, maybe China, maybe all different places. I think that there's so much dense population and a large number of transactions in Brooklyn and Staten Island alone. I think that first start with the micro markets and continue expanding, because when we're looking for immediate Gennady, as agents, we're looking for micro neighborhoods, because let's say, for example, the Jersey, Florida referrals, from my experience personally, that took a little bit longer. Whereas, in your local markets, if you're in Sheepshead Bay, for example, the customers or friends and family might live in Staten Island. So I think agents and entrepreneurs should focus on those relationships, because most likely they'll have somebody that can overlap in other markets. And what's interesting about our markets, Gennady, you may be the quote unquote the Sheepshead Bay expert, and then your friends and families may only think you actually sell in Sheepshead Bay, which is weird. But it's happened to me in my 20-year career. They may say, wow, yeah, well, Mike only sells in Bensonhurst, so I'm not going to call him on that Staten Island piece of business. So, but any final notes on that? Because we want to kind of continue now with the legal portion of this. And that's kind of talking, as you mentioned, you touched lightly on that before. How were the customers, so now you get them into this funnel, what were some of the challenges, if you could touch on any of them, like the renegotiations, what were they doing from the legal side, right? And how that was a normal part of our business, because many agents right now, as we entered this present time, many agents right now might not have been in the business back then. And when they're seeing these things come up, there's extreme frustration. And in reality, Gennady, the way I see it, and I'm sure I'd love to hear from the legal aspect of it, it's actually kind of normal, where I think a customer raises a red flag later on, even though they might be in contract, they raise a red flag and say, hey guys, actually I didn't like this, and I talked to my attorney who's representing me, and we want to kind of negotiate. Was that normal back then? And are we going to see this transition now? Can you touch on that?
That's an excellent point, Mike. And what is happening now is essentially what did occur back then. You have an attempt from multiple, either buyer or seller, to get back to the table, and now it's starting to change the terms because of what they're calling the changing market, or back then was the ruin of the financial system. And everybody back then was a victim of predatory lending. So that was always, my note was robo-signed back then and predatory lending. That was everything that we heard for about 5 to 6 years straight from 2010. Right now, what we are hearing is that as a result of the market going down and real estate values falling so sharply, we want to renegotiate. And now that conversation comes from either the seller or the buyer. And I'll explain how we addressed it back then, and similarly how we are addressing it right now. And I think the first and most important thing to do is to acknowledge their feelings and their sentiment, that yes, they have the right to be concerned. They have the right to ask these questions, and be empathetic to them and to their situation and position in asking these questions. One of the things that I like to do is, I like to say, look, if I was in your situation, and I have been in the past, I would be asking the same questions, and I would have the same concerns. After you are done with that initial statement, then my wife was actually just laughing at me a few days while I was at the dinner table, because she said that I got much louder on the call and more aggressive. And I told her it's because tonality is such a big thing when you're speaking to somebody. I had to then become aggressive and assertive with my client after I did exactly what I told you in the beginning. And I stated, look, however, with all of that being said, your intuition is not correct. The market prices right now are still stable. The stock market is at a great rebound right now. Appraisals are not coming in short right now. There is no proof for appraisals to come in short right now. You as a buyer have no right to contact your lender right now and tell them that their appraiser did a bad job in showing that the appraisal came in at or above, while you think that it should have come in at or below. I start to get assertive and I tell them, these are your expectations. So for instance, back then and right now, what we were stating to them, look, you're in contract right now, okay? The contract has the terms set. When you got into contract, we established the relationship that you have with the other party and said, you cannot get out of the contract unless X, Y, Z, and it has to do with lending. Now, right now, the buyers are asking us, can I get out of the contract? The markets are not good. I don't want to pay this price anymore. It's not worth it anymore. Back then, they were saying the same thing. So here is what we need to do, basically in a nutshell, and what we have been doing in keeping this together. Be empathetic and acknowledge at the out front, which is what we're doing. And again, that's just personal opinion, how we're getting these relationships and moving these deals forward. Then we acknowledge aggressively and assertively, not yelling at them, but assertive as if it's not up for discussion. That's how things are. The market is not depreciating. Appraisals are coming in. Some lenders are not lending like they used to, but your lender still is, so that's not an issue. If it's on the seller side, and the seller comes to you and says, I don't want to sell right now because the market is falling. I don't want to sell right now because I don't want to sell for less than what I was going to get 3 months prior to when I listed the property with you. The same thing applies. You have to keep the seller educated enough to understand. If you look at what happened in the last recession, give them examples and educate them. When the recession began to turn, which is, it's coming up for us right now. We're not in a recession. This is an epidemic, a medical condition that caused the economic downturn. So it's not what happened in the past. Do not tell them that it's the same thing, because then they will get into a conversation with you that you don't want to be in. But explain to them, we should keep this property, either if that's your opinion, we should keep this property on the market because you're going to have a lot of people on the fence that are going to jump into the market because you're going to have a supply issue coming out of this. Or if you want to take this off the market because you feel like the property that you're listing on behalf of your seller is going to be something at a higher value moving forward, make sure that, again, you are stating to them the conditions under which you are going to do this. You are not asking them for their feelings. You're not asking them how to do this. You have to be assertive. Look, John, the way that this needs to work is, and I've been on the phone, I've been on webinars, and I've been doing this for the last, as soon as this happened, this is the direction the market's headed into, and the professional advice is, and this is what I'm advising you that we are going to do. If you want to take it off, we're going to take it off the market for 3 months. You guys know the pitch in terms of tolling the days on market thing going on. And you're going to tell them that I believe that, and all the experts are saying, within 3 months, the market is going to be back. You're going to have a lot of buyers coming off the fence, and it's going to set up bidding wars because you have a lot of investors also looking for opportunities. And these investors and buyers on the fence are going to come up and start to strike this market up higher and higher. You do not want to be on the sidelines when this happens. It's all about the delivery of the message that we have been providing to our clients. At the end of the day, we have not lost a single contract. At the end of the day, we have not had a single contract cancellation as a result of a buyer's or seller's request to do so. The only time we have contracts that are unable to be fulfilled right now is a result of the lender not being able to close or fund. Now, most of that has to do with loans that are in jumbo and above. Most of that has to do with commercial. Otherwise, buyers and sellers, if we approach them and educate them properly, we are keeping everybody at contract and at bay, because I am telling them that although right now you feel like you have a deal that you can get out of because you're not getting the best out of it, you have to wait and have your money tied in this transaction until the courts open, until litigation can ensue, and until the time that is resolved. I literally had a conversation like this yesterday. And as of today, I'm already resolving it because of that literal conversation. So time factor is going to be not only something that could benefit us, but you're using it as something that could hurt our clients if they want us to postpone and we don't feel it's the best to postpone, or if they want to jump in and we don't feel like it's the best to jump in. Goes back to education and that very important pillar that Mike was discussing.
Yeah, guys, and that's great how we're now marching into the present, then into the future, is to give everybody hope. And that's really my goal of these chats here, is to give everybody hope. So as we as entrepreneurs recognize that this is normal and there's not this extreme, oh my goodness, I'll never get out of this as an entrepreneur. In fact, so the proof is in the pudding, Gennady. In fact, almost everybody that I interviewed in the past 2 weeks for our agents, most of them have started their business in 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011. And those folks are probably, almost every single one of them I interviewed or talked to are at the top tier of their profession. And that's my mission here for any agents that might not have been through this before. Know that there's plenty of hope. It's just as you guided them, from the legal side, I'm excited. I appreciate what you shared on that, because that's what has made myself as an entrepreneur stronger, because I've communicated with our attorney, strategic partners here. Anytime something came up, it was a lot of communication and not letting the communication breakdown happen, because that's an education of the marketplace. Knowing the numbers, knowing the facts, and sticking to local facts. And in fact, this is a little commercial here. Next week, we're actually going to have that conversation around the current market conditions. So, where listings are at, listings down, up, and stuff like that. Because I think that agents as a whole continue to educate, as interesting enough, as attorneys are educating their clients about what's really happening in the market from that side. So thank you for that. So now as we march into the present, let me just say a couple things over here, because we want to be mindful of our time. So if anybody has questions, because we are going to lead into present, which would essentially bring us into the future with this whole COVID-19 legal topic, please put your questions in the chat box or raise your hand. Know that if your question's in the chat box, I won't call on you. I'll just mention your name, and if you'd like to engage with Gennady and the rest of the team, then I'd be happy to call on you and you can engage. So no, don't be fearful that if you put a question that I'm going to call on you to re-ask it. So please go ahead and put your questions in the chat box. So, and then we're just going to watch our time over here. We got about 10 minutes left of our meeting. So this way we can, number one, is respect your time and respect all the other professionals on this call. So, and guys, Yuriy and Igor, if you wanted to chime in, feel free to as well. If there's anything that you want to touch on as we go through this. So back again now, we're in the present, and you kind of touched on it already, but I want to launch us into present and future. And the present is COVID-19, of course. What does it mean with this whole disclosure form? And then, of course, what's the future look like? And future meaning whether it's economic outlook and the new norm. That's going to bring us into the final pieces of this conversation. So COVID-19, we have it now. We have this around us, this situation, this pandemic, and many people are starting to get adjusted, but there was some confusion, Gennady. The confusion lied around this NISAR COVID disclosure form. And as I stated in our last conversation, I'm going to say hold harmless, but as I mentioned, I'm not an attorney. This is just from my perspective. It was a hold harmless disclosure form saying that, anybody that we've interacted with, it's not our fault. So I'm being very clear because we are on a group call over here. It is Remax Edge's, we're following executive orders. We are not advising any of our agents to conduct any business that's non-essential according to NYSAR's updates. So please make sure that you follow those rules and government orders not to show. And of course, now we're going to rely on Gennady and his legal team to kind of just talk about what this disclosure means for now and in the future. And one last component here is that we are conversating with Yuriy Moshes' office about what we could do when we come out of this. But what is this COVID-19 disclosure? Can we talk a little bit about this at this point? What does it look like for us?
Sure. Well, I'm going to try to, let me see if I can do this.
Here we are.
All right, good. Is this the beauty that we're all referring to?
This is the beauty, yes.
All right. So this is something that this COVID rider, so to speak, came out from NYSAR. This has been out for a few weeks already. On several transactions, we've used this. On all of our transactions, we use a variation of what this rider is essentially trying to say. And basically, it's a form of protection for the parties involved, stating that if somebody is delayed or if there's an emergency or if there's a government declaration as a result of COVID, that this transaction can be essentially put off until it is until it is feasible to proceed. There also gives an option for the parties to cancel the agreement as a result. Now, Olga was on the line previously, one of your colleagues, and she was stating that, there's a lot of uproar in regards to liability on behalf of the parties. And what I want to mention is that this is a template. This is something that can be changed. We have used many variations of COVID language in our contract, essentially to protect our respective party as a result of COVID. So the education element again comes in that when you are speaking to leads, when you are speaking to your existing clients, the COVID pandemic and the ability to go into contract should not deter our clients from entering into contract, because there is protected language inside of there that is going to be utilized by the attorneys, and you should look for that. Now, I know Russ just let me know that there is another addendum that is being used. I don't have it, but essentially they're all similar. Basically, it's in regards to liability.
I'm actually trying to get that other disclosure form now. There was a disclosure form saying that if you were to interact with an appraiser, an attorney, we're going to get that to you right now. That if there was exposure to it, I don't think this is so this is one that's definitely important. So I'm happy that you brought this one in here. There's another one out there that basically says that in reference to interacting, it's basically saying, yeah, let me not say basically what it says. I'm gonna forward that. So continue on. Sorry.
It's coming in right now. There's hopefully gonna be a MacBook drop that's gonna happen, but it doesn't. But anyways, I'm looking at it right now. Okay. Anyway, okay. Now I got it. I got the general gist. So basically, if we are the cause of being next to somebody that has COVID, and that is the reason for and that's the reason why the deal cannot move forward, then the other party can pursue us because we are liable. I have to put it out there. I have a strong feeling that we are going to be extremely hard pressed to have any courts to hold a party liable during the COVID epidemic, that where some party is going to blame that the other side got sick because of an appraisal or because of a showing. I got to tell you, I don't see judges becoming scientists and physicians trying to track the spread of COVID. So I think this is going to be extremely hard pressed. This is the same conversation I had. And the reason why we have these indications, because we also have background in litigation. So when we are discussing about what we believe judges and courts are going to be holding us to and our clients to, it has to do with what we've seen in the past. And there you go. Thank you, Mike. I think what's going to tend to happen is we have several judges right now, especially in Kings County, that have passed away. I think that when these discussions get into the court system, and I speak to attorneys on the other side about this all the time, I don't see any judge holding a client liable that there is a breach of contract as a result of COVID. There has to be pure intent and gross negligence on one of the parties. That is my opinion, where a court's going to hold somebody liable as a result of a COVID infection or a COVID delay. This is a disclosure by all means. I don't see it necessary to be signed. If I was an attorney representing the other side, of course, I would cross out the language where it would find my party or my client to be liable. And I would.
Gennady, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure this to be clear. Remax Edge, so this disclosure form, we'll have to discuss, Gennady, because this is a reference to agents who might be meeting a buyer, seller. So I hear the one side of I just want to make sure that agents hear this. I hear one side of the coin, Gennady, and this just brings up an important topic. Gennady and his office may not allow his buyers and sellers to sign. But the reality is this, we're going to continue looking at this to protect our business over here, because basically what's been coming up in a lot of these discussions is under the new norm of showings, and we're not there yet. But let's say, for example, if all the transactions should be conducted remotely, including appraisals, inspections. But in the case that you meet a customer in person, right, and it says here in person only to the extent legally necessary in accordance with appropriate social distancing. But it says it may become necessary in limited circumstances for a real estate licensee, inspector, appraiser, or other third party to access the property. So such access raises the possibility of potential liability resulting from exposure to COVID-19. By agreeing to permit to such parties to enter the property, basically they sort of hold harmless piece in there. And really what NYSAR is saying is that they're suggesting that we get this signed. So I guess maybe you can bring up some, multiple conversations here, Gennady, from if your client, if you had a client you were representing, buyer or seller, would you have them sign this? And it's a discussion, guys. So just understand that right now in the current situation, these are discussions. And, as I mentioned, we need more clarity. But certainly this is a helpful form because we are in uncharted waters. So clear that up first, Gennady, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's obviously a lot of conversations to be had, as Mike pointed out. This is the first time I'm reading it, so thank you for bringing it to my attention. I've got to say that, I don't see anything extremely dangerous in here. I see this as one party essentially disclosing that they had to interact with a necessary or required party to move this deal forward. My concern always would be that if you are signing this and if you do contract COVID, and basically it's that worst case scenario, right? We have to think of it on both sides of the coin. Worst case scenario situation over here is somebody does get sick as a result of an appraisal, as a result of a showing, and then as a result of that, you are unable to move forward with a transaction of some sort. This has, again, worst case scenario for a very litigious attorney out there or a very litigious client out there. This opens up the opportunity possibly to pursue somebody for negligence. However, I don't see it. I don't see this being something, and Olga, to your point as well, based on our previous conversation, I don't see this being an opportunity to pursue another party for getting sick, for breach, for not being able to close if they interact with an appraisal. I think that that's a very, very aggressive approach, Olga, as to this disclosure. I, for instance, would not take any client that would want to proceed against another party based on this, because I don't think that it's going to be very relevant. Not relevant. I just don't think it'll be held up in the court. I have a problem with something like this that is essentially just a disclosure being pulled into the courts, and because it is so general and so wide in scope, looking at it nicely right now and having a good view of it, I honestly do not see a lot of danger in it.
Got it. Good. Thank you, Gennady. And just FYI, as I remind everybody, I'm sorry to be repetitive, but I have to, we are still under executive order. You're not to show, and as it says in there, to the extent legally possible. So we are not to show any properties, but to get the transaction through, please clear it up with the attorney or your attorneys. But right now we're looking to Yuriy's office to really help us clear these things up, to see what protects us out there. So as we roll through this, guys, just because we're winding down now, the future and the new norm. So the new norm, as we roll through this, we already kind of talked about the economic outlook, possibly lower transactions, negotiations and things of such that. But what do you see as the going forward with this? Not just only COVID-19, because it says extreme social distance, and again, I hate to talk about the media, but the reality is it says it's going to take some time to get through this. So even when they lift the orders, it's going to take time. So what do you see in relation to possibly this disclosure, closing, showings? Just if you could touch quickly on that, and then we'll open up for questions.
Sure. I think personally, and what we have been internally doing and what we have been, speaking to everyone else about is, do not have a conversation with your clients about, well, we'll show it in September. Well, we'll show it in August, or we will put off until this is all over. I think that we are coming out of the gates from this situation in a very new era. I think that remote and virtual business is going to increase at a skyrocketing and extremely fast pace. I think technology is things that were supposed to be let out 5 to 10 years forward are coming out during this pandemic and epidemic to accommodate virtual work. I think offices and people generally are going to be a lot more accommodating to work from home and to make a lot more business and financial and personal decisions from home. So what I recommend is move your deals forward. Do not put things off until the future. Do not tell your clients, well, I've got 5 people that want to see this house. Let's start scheduling them for June. Start working on methodology and ways to present them with the property. Do your virtual showings. Have the seller, whatever it is to kind of present to your people that things need to move forward and progress. Do not put things off, because at the end of the day, we don't want to stifle our business in the next quarters to come by doing so. Just as if you guys know very well, New Year's for Remax, I was just speaking to Mike about this, starts in November. Right now is the time for you to start, thinking about as if it's your November New Year's, whereas everybody else in your competition is thinking about, oh, I'm going to get out of the gate and I'm going to go door to door and I'm going to crush it when this happens. You've got to be already crushing it now, as opposed to waiting for that out of the gate thing. And that's what I think our focus on is right now. Personally, we are trying to build new relationships right now in order to materialize them moving forward. The most important thing is move business forward right now. Do not click pause. Do not click stop. Adjust, change, pivot, and move the deals forward. Move your relationships forward. I mean, I hear some agents right now that have warehouses with furniture, where they use furniture for showings. Agents are starting to rent some of that furniture to people that are looking, to move around, like almost rent a center. There are plenty of opportunities if you're looking to pivot, but the goal is move business forward. Do not sit back. Do not wait for it. That's kind of what we are personally focused on in our
Yeah, and
business.
just as you mentioned, the wait and see situation, right? So, and I've got some questions coming in, so thank you. Keep those questions coming through the chat box. We're going to get to it in literally right after this statement here. The wait and see method, and thinking that we're going to go back to the same. We're already seeing in some of my mastermind groups in other states who kind of, I wouldn't say relieved or relaxed, because some of those states didn't have as many, cases, but they're all under extreme social distance, even those states that don't have as many cases. And what I've seen over there is they're doing these recordings, right? So what they'll do is they'll turn the camera around and they'll say, "Hi, I'm at 123 Main Street right now," and they're giving the tour as if they're on TV, and not these Matterports. And Matterport's a great tool but Matterport takes the agent out of the branding. They got this little box, and that's fine too. But going forward, people are going to want to see your face because that's the connection piece. So, and people are not looking necessarily for professional photos because they can look at the photos, but they also want to get that live tour. That's what we're seeing in other states now. From my mastermind group, and it's thinking forward, not pause, because what's going to happen is those agents that start to adopt this, when the gates open up and they've already started advancing and learning how to use it, how to implement it, those are the ones that are going to skyrocket. And then the agents who are on the wait and see side, they might get busy with starting to interact with people, and they might be 6-8 months on the wait and see because they're going to get quote unquote busy again. The agent that's continued to implement into this business, they're going to be so far advanced, because the word on the street from these other states is the consumer will look at these videos, they'll engage, and then make an appointment. And that kind of is very different. Whereas, not very different. People looked at virtual tours like Matterports. People looked at photos and then engaged. Now it seems that they're seeing high engagement with, Johnny, who's given the tour under a quote unquote live stream. Because I'm seeing that some of these portals, and we won't mention the portals for many reasons. Portals are websites out there generating buyer leads. The portals are offering now live stream opportunities. So thank you, Gennady, for that, and thank you for sharing. So if there are no final notes from Gennady, Igor, and Yuriy, we're going to go on to questions. Is that cool? Any final notes from Yuriy?
Mike, can I chime in for a second on something that Gennady said?
Sure, go ahead. Dmitry Kogan, go ahead.
As far as when Gennady was talking about the contracts that you guys have going on right now, that people are starting to talk about renegotiating and everything. Just following up on that, not necessarily negotiating, but the deals that you guys do have going live right now, very important to check in with all the parties involved as far as if they are good to close. What we're doing with a lot of the deals, and I'm doing that myself personally, is just make sure to call all the parties. I mean, I can't call the sellers, but I'll reach out to the attorneys. I'll reach out on anybody that I could speak to, and I'll ask for help of everybody. Because you might have a deal that you're presenting the buyer and everything is looking good and you're ready to close, just to, when you're clear to close, just to find out that the buyers at this point, due to the virus, have nowhere to go. They might have lost their job. They're not going forward with their mortgage. So we are asking for everybody to make sure to be aware of the situation of everybody involved. If it's the lawyers are closing, if they're active, if the lenders are closing, with whoever you're working with, just make sure be involved on every side. Make sure everybody knows it.
Dmitry, that was a great point. Yeah, that again, great point, because that leads us to a question that Kelly Wu asked. So Dmitry, stay on.
I'm here.
Okay, good. Kelly Wu asked a question, Gennady, which is also very relevant to having a lender on this. So Kelly Wu's question is, the contract is expired. If the buyer didn't apply for the mortgage and the buyer changed their mind, can the seller keep the 10% down payment? So I guess just you got what that question meant. So basically, it sounds like if the contract went in, and Kelly, just correct me in the chat box if the question was asked incorrectly. It sounds like buyer went into contract, but never applied for the loan, and I guess now the buyer wants out of the contract. He's asking, can the seller keep the down payment?
Good question. I think this goes to a situation that we can relate to. whether we are in a pandemic, an epidemic or not, whether this was as of January or whether this is now. This is a clear breach of contract. When you are not, as a buyer, even applying for a mortgage, which is your obligation as per the contract, you're in breach even before you get denied, because one of the obligations in the contract that buyer and seller has is that buyer is going to apply to a lender within a particular amount of time in order to facilitate this mortgage. Here, I would say this is pretty egregious, and there's going to be a fight here for that 10%. So this happens even before the pandemic. Our clients, unfortunately, think they're smarter than us and the professionals that are surrounding them. We have a client personally of ours that felt that that is the case, and they didn't disclose certain information to us prior to entering into contracts, and now we're in a battle ourselves. Here again, and I see, Kelly, that you're saying contract signed January 30th. Clearly here, this was prior to the pandemic and epidemic. There's going to be clear breach here. It's just a matter of how much of that 10% they're going to be able to keep or get back if this goes into litigation.
My goodness, that was a fantastic question, Kelly. Thank you for asking that, because it leads me, and guys, keep asking questions because I want to add to that, Gennady, because something that was brought up is force majeure, right? So force majeure meaning some, act of God, this is, so for guys that, for maybe Gennady, you can clear up what that means. So this way I'm not an attorney. So force majeure is something that was brought up quite a bit in the past couple of weeks in many different spaces. So can you tell the group what that means, number one, and what does it mean? Because it relates to also Kelly Wu's question. Does force majeure apply here?
Great question, great topic. Force majeure, as it is currently being discussed, because again, it hasn't been tested or litigated yet.
Just to go roll back, just can we explain what force majeure means for everybody? Yep. And then, yep.
So force majeure is a contract clause that many contracts have. And what it essentially stipulates is that because of an act of God, an unforeseen act of God, the contract, it is impossible for the contract or for the parties to maintain their position or to be bound by the contract or to do what they are bound to by the contract. Because of that act of God, then the contract can be canceled or terminated with no liability. Now, let me back up for a moment. I know I lost my words a little bit there. Again, just to recap what force majeure is. Force majeure is a contract clause that is included in many contracts, essentially stating that if there's an act of God that prevents a party, meaning not just prevents, but makes it impossible. I want to put that in quotation marks because that is a very important term. Makes it impossible on a party to perform their duties and obligations as per the contract, then the contract is void and their obligation is void. Now, with that being said as to what force majeure is, do not speak to your neighbors, do not speak to your cousin, do not speak to anybody that's telling you otherwise. Force majeure is not applicable to COVID. COVID is not an act of God, okay? It doesn't matter who our God is and who we pray to right now. And as the past is an indication of force majeure clauses and the litigation that ensued in the past, such as 2010 and H1N1 and other pandemics and epidemics, force majeure was never held up to mean that it also covers pandemics and epidemics. That is first of all. Second of all, again, has to be impossible, again, for a party to perform. Not difficult, not straining, not financially burdensome, impossible. So death makes it impossible, okay? Financial markets closing and no money being transferred makes things impossible, but not protected under force majeure. So I want everybody to understand, if you're looking at your insurance statements, if you're looking at your insurance contract, if you're looking towards real estate, if you're looking towards lease agreements or contract to purchase or sell, such as sponsor agreements. So if you have deals and transactions with sponsors, a force majeure clause is included in the contract as per a requirement of the Attorney General's office. It will not release your client, whether buyer or seller, from their obligations in that contract because of force majeure. So do not look to it. Do not give your clients hope for it. Be frank. As of right now, the way the law is being discussed, force majeure is not covering COVID. It did not cover H1N1 or any other flus or viruses in the past, and it is not indicated to do so right now.
And let me be clear, Gennady, just as a quick disclaimer here. So Gennady has shared some legal advice, and he is in fact an attorney. So as Gennady said, when you're having a conversation with your customer or client, please disclose that you've spoken to, this advice comes from an attorney, and they should speak to an attorney. So please, even though Gennady cleared this up, do not act as an attorney, because if you're telling them that the force majeure is not in place and it never has been, you could say that you spoke to an attorney and that's what he said, but you should speak to an attorney as well. Do not close the door on a client. Remember, we're real estate agents, so don't just say, hey, it doesn't apply. Say, hey, we were on a call with one of our attorney partners and this is what he said, but it's important for you to speak to your attorney for that interpretation. I hope that makes sense for everybody on the call.
Great clarification, Mike. I couldn't say it better myself. That's the best CYA statement all day.
Great. So if there's no more questions, guys, is there any more questions? I don't see any more questions in the chat box. You can raise your hand if you want to speak as well. No? Okay. Gennady, Yuriy, Igor, any final notes as we wrap over here?
I think I talked a lot. I'll give it to Igor. Igor.
Hey guys, what's going on? I just wanted to kind of touch base. One last thing is just people are doing drive-bys for appraisal, so you don't have to actually be out there showing the property. So there have been a lot of changes I've been hearing on the mortgage end. Dimitri can verify that. Also, you do have a contingencies and the COVID contingencies and denials and the mortgage contingencies. So, you know, if the client lost their job, it is what it is. You know, it's something that you should push closings right away. Any co-op deals that you may have, we're going through hell sometimes with the management company to schedule closing due to the fact that either the borrower cannot move in, is their rule, or that the management company does not want to close until until the pandemic is over. So before you submit a deal, before you make sure you speak to the management company and find out what their protocol is what we do is we email them and say, hey, what's your protocol on closings right off the bat, just to see where they stand and what the timeline will be, so we know when to lock the rate, when to advise them of that, when to proceed with either Skype they're doing now or any kind of video chat, including Zoom conferences for interviews and whatnot. So a lot of changes. I think it's going to be a lot of positive changes as well when we come out of this.
Igor, can we pause for a second? Because that was
sure.
that was like a lot of stuff going on these calls. We have a lot of agents on this call that do co-ops and condos. So guys, I don't know if you heard that, but a good strategy, not only for now, is you should be reaching out to management and or the president of those buildings, whether it's condos or co-ops, and find out what their policies and procedures are, because that will also set you apart from other agents. So Igor, phenomenal advice over there. Because it's something that we haven't even spoke about here with anybody who's working on condos and co-ops. Because imagine, even in the quote unquote, when we come out of this, there may be, as you said, some management companies will have some other new policies as this breaks out. So excellent point. So continue.
Yeah, so that's kind of my whole thing, spiel. And these days, doing remote closings is not as easy as 1, 2, 3. We're literally weeks and days of coordinating and trying to make it happen for the closing to obviously schedule it. So there's a lot of moving parts. So I just ask for everybody to be patient. If you do have a co-op deal with us, we obviously keep everybody in the loop. We keep communication flowing, and we may need some help from you guys. But as you can see, remote closings are happening. We are closing them. So, try to keep the deals moving along. And like I said, just call the management company. Sometimes the board president may say, I'm not signing the recognition agreement until this thing is over. And just know what you're getting into and know the timeline. That's going to help us in negotiations in the contract and put a longer mortgage contingencies as well as the closing dates.
Yeah, and again, guys, just in case you missed that, very well said, Igor. In case you missed that, not only is it for when it's in contract, but please, I think it behooves everybody that's on this call right now. You have an active listing or a listing that's about to go active. Start calling up management. Start calling up those buildings, because even when this thing unpauses, I'm sure there's going to be some new stuff that comes out. So be ahead of that. Find out who's that contact person at management. Find out who the president of that building is. So this way you know what their protocol is when this is all finished. So excellent, Igor. Thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having us too.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you. Alan Zhu asked a question, so maybe this is important to, or this is for you, Igor. Alan Zhu asked, is management company able to charge processing fee for condo questionnaire form?
I'm sure. Yeah, why not? I mean, they always do. I mean, condo questionnaire is always in the buyer's obligation.
Yes.
So the answer is yes, absolutely. The management company can charge application fees, condominium questionnaire fees. They could charge the same charge they always have. That's not going to change. Or hasn't changed yet.
Got it. Yeah, they might increase it for these tough times. Russ
and
asks,
delay as well. The delay is what's killing a lot of the deals as well, or taking longer. Just real quick on that questionnaire, like we have a condo questionnaire right now with the deal. It took management almost 2.5 weeks to fill it out because they won't expect a check certified mailed to them. But the time they receive it and email you the questionnaire, and they're all working remotely, it's time consuming, as you could imagine, just to go to the bank these days.
Yeah. And now a question came up from Russ. So I guess this might be for Gennady or Yuriy. So yeah, Remax Edge is no showing. Got it. Understood. Agents can do live stream showings and open houses. For clarification, are we allowed to visit vacant and occupied properties for these live stream showings? So I guess that one's for Gennady or Yuriy. And just to be clear, from what we've heard on guidance from some of the attorneys we've worked with so far, the answer is that try to use the seller and as you try to use the seller to go ahead and video those at the moment. So Gennady, what's your perspective on that in terms of agents visiting these properties at this point? Remember, guys, executive order. So please tiptoe on this one, Gennady, please.
Absolutely. Look, the executive orders say that if we can't keep our distance within 6 feet or more, that we are not supposed to be out there. That's extremely clear. Can't be clearer cut than that. If you have a vacant home and you have nobody in there, I have not seen any restrictions on showing or streaming a vacant home when you are not there with anyone else. So that is the only caveat. Now, as far as you being in there with somebody else, I'm going to take a strong, aggressive no on that. And I'm going to go and piggyback off of what Mike was saying. We have seen where sellers are on Zoom calls with all the agents and the prospective buyers, and the sellers walking through the entire property so that there is no loss of control there. So the buyers are not speaking or communicating directly to a seller without you as an agent being there as the intermediary. The other thing that we have seen is that buyer inspectors are doing FaceTime sometimes also, depending on who you're working with and on the relationship that you have. As they go through the property to inspect it, they're also doing that FaceTime kind of walkthrough for the buyer on the buyer's behalf. So again, just to clarify, hard no on streaming or showing a property with other people in there. Take precaution in vacant properties, and I have not seen any language stating that we are forbidden to show a vacant property virtually through FaceTime or Zoom.
Got it. Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, as a company, because of the executive order and because we are in uncharted waters, I can't suggest that you go to even a vacant property, because if you contract, COVID-19, we don't, you guys are independent contractors, but as a company, we can't be held liable because we advise you to go to a property. Of course, follow executive orders, follow CDC guidelines when going to these properties on your own to a vacant property. So please be very, very careful out there. It's our guidance right now that we are on complete pause. So if you could use someone else to do it, and you not being there because of where we're in right now, that would be extreme advice from the company. Have someone else go in to visit the property, not yourself. So I think that the question Alan Zhu asked was answered by Yuriy. Let me just make sure that we have nothing else.
That was me.
Oh, that was you. Thank you, Igor. And I don't know if there's any other questions. So if there's no other questions, any final notes from Yuriy? Because I think we got everybody.
Yuri's actually at a closing.
Oh, he's at a closing? Okay.
Remotely.
Got it.
About 5 minutes ago.
Guys, this went overtime, and I really, really appreciate how much you guys spent on this call, because we were getting this wrapped up by 12, and a lot of great questions, a lot of great information.
I have a question.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Mary Lee. Go ahead.
Because we have a deal in contract, and the boy, his job is at risk right now. They cut his hours, and the employer sent the the employment letter saying that he doesn't know what the situation will be in a month. His mother works in a hotel. She's on the contract too, and she's furloughed. So now they have good money in the bank. They submitted their application. Most likely they're going to be denied. And we don't know. The seller's very arrogant and saying, well, they're going to get unemployment. So doesn't that cover the maintenance and the mortgage? And he has X number of dollars in the bank, a substantial amount. So is he deliberately trying to get out of the deal? So what happens if they're denied, but they do get unemployment? I mean,
and Gennady, before or any of you guys answer this question, please, we are on a recording here. Yeah, we're just, guys, be clear, we're on a recording, so please do not disclose any property addresses, names, or identities. Because at some point we will post this. So go ahead, Gennady.
I'll jump in, actually, if you don't mind, Gennady.
Igor, yeah.
I mean, does unemployment count as like income?
No, it doesn't.
Okay. So
let's be clear one thing. Right now, with the banks the way they are, they're going to be calling verification of employment, verifying that the person still works there today at the closing table. And if they're not working today, even if they had a paycheck last week, they cannot obtain a mortgage or obtain financing. I'm sure Dimitri could jump in on that real quick as well.
How many days
absolutely
before the closing? How many days do
the day of the closing, they verify employment.
Really?
Yes,
so even if they did get approved by the board, it could change toward the end.
Dimitri, you want to jump in on that since you're the mortgage?
Yeah, I guess so. It could.
Right now, actually, the verification of employment could be done up to 5 days prior to closing. This is a new guidelines. At least with us, some banks might have adjusted as well. Unemployment income is not considered continuation of income, so unfortunately, we won't be able to use that for income. Keep in mind, in this situation, maybe have them call the employer and just maybe need to verify that the job is still there. And since this is a co-op deal, it does depend on the bank, how they want to run with it. Again, just to apply for the board, you just need a commitment. And by the time they have the board interview, they will be, hopefully things will get better. So since it's a co-op, you might still have the deal going there.
I mean, we're proceeding forward as of the contract, we're proceeding forward, and
Early,
we'll
but
see what happens.
on that note, just make sure maybe they show their last pay stubs instead of showing unemployment at the same time. I'm not sure how they want to go about that. They didn't
get unemployment yet. Well, the mother did, but whatever. I'm just hoping that it could work out because things could change in another month. So we don't know.
Something that we could do is just extend the contract as well and just wait it out until they go back to work. I mean, furlough doesn't. They get still their job. So if the bank needs a pay stub to close, even if they get board approval, we won't be able to close. We also have in every contract, just so everybody understands, a funding clause. We've had this for many, many years since the 2008-9 crisis. And if the loan cannot fund because they are unemployed, we could also potentially get out of the contract or ask for an extension. And at the current time, I don't see why anybody would not.
And at that point,
if the board even allows it to move in.
Right, but then at that point, it's tricky then. Would the person lose their down payment?
No, I mean, nobody loses their down payment. Just, they go through litigations, worst case scenario. For the most part, we've seen everybody return most of their down payment back. But it doesn't work like sellers think it works, where, he's, even if breaching the contract, there's a negotiations out of $50,000, they'll give him $5,000 or whatever the numbers are. They don't just get their down payment money we'll extend the contract. If we're the buyer's attorneys, we make sure to protect it. But at the same time, there is extensions that we can go about. There's funding clauses that we can go about. And if they lost their job, at the end of the day, it is what it is.
Yeah, it's
We could
really
buy
tricky.
time.
Really
So
tricky.
we got time for two final questions. I know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Lee. We got two final questions, so because this is what we have to be mindful of everybody's time here. So we got Olga Moldavsky, and then we have Ruslan. So Olga, go ahead and then.
Thank you so much. No, it's already covered. You were just elaborated on the topic. I wanted furlough versus.
Olga, we can't hear you. So hold on a second. Hold on, Olga. Okay, Olga, go ahead.
No, I just said that thank you. Igor already elaborated on the question I wanted to hear, so that's it. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Olga. And then the final question was by Russ. Russ asked a question about, is there a time limit on board approvals?
No.
I
can't
the only
answer at this point.
So the only thing that I'm going to suggest is if board approval is being extended because clearance can't be made due to economic or employment issues, then the board may at some point moving forward ask for follow-up financials as well. I haven't seen that. We have not seen that yet. I anticipate that is something that is possible because at the end of the day, the board does have full control of everything. So let's not be too surprised if that does in fact come up in the next coming months, where boards are going to be asking for updated financials or records.
I've seen boards also, kind of skip the interview process and just straight give approvals as well. We had a board that says, okay, you're approved and that's it. And then we just move towards closing as well. So, but there's no time limit per se.
Great.
Yeah,
Well, guys, yeah, go ahead.
One thing, Mike, I also wanted to say, look, co-ops are businesses, right? They're entities. They've got to show hopefully positive reserves on their books. They want to move transactions forward because their liabilities are ongoing. If they want to be able to sell units moving forward and banks being able to lend to them because they have healthy reserves, they've got to move these sales. So boards have to be a little bit more creative moving forward in order to maintain reserves so that they can be financeable in the future by other banks. If they're only taking in liabilities and they're not selling units, let's say there's no income coming in from flip taxes, or if there's no income coming in from sponsor sales, or if there's no income coming in from, let's say, applications, they have a situation, they have a problem that they don't want to be in. So I think that they're going to be a little bit more lenient depending on their financial situation moving forward.
Fantastic. Well, very good. Guys, this has been phenomenal. Really want to thank Law Office Yuriy Moshes, Yuriy, Gennady, Igor. Seriously, thank you. And thank you, Dimitri Kogan, Freedom, for jumping on the back end over here. And thank you to all of our guests and asking good questions and staying patient. Appreciate all of you guys. We look forward to keeping this fireside chats going. So have a beautiful day. Stay safe, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you as well. Take care.
Thank you.